Jeremy Corbyn.
Thanks, John. I'm the last speaker, so that's a very good news. And even better news is I'll be pretty brief because my throat is hurting me, innit? Because yesterday you were robbed. You absolutely were robbed. I was at the Arsenal game. We were very disappointed for you. I just a message first of all from Tony Benn. I went to see Tony last week Sunday. He's had a problem, a health problem, as everybody well knows. I spent about an hour and a half, nearly 2 hours with him. He was chatting, he was fine, he was very friendly, he was delighted to see us, and we had a long discussion about the nature of Parliament, parliamentary democracy, the Labour Party, World Human Rights Movement, environmental considerations, my allotments, my former dog, my present cat, and so on. And he was really pleased to see us, and at the end of it, he said, you know, I haven't been as active as I used to be. And I said, oh, come on, Tony, you know. But we need you to stick around a bit longer until we can bring about some changes. So we made a deal at the end that he agreed to stick around a bit longer if we agreed to bring about some real changes. So we shook hands on that, and his grandson was the witness to it. So it's there, okay? So I'm sure I can carry your good wishes back to Tony. Yeah, of course. He's a great guy, and we need him around. John, nice to see you back, because at last, when you put down all these endless amendments to bills, I always support them, but sometimes I don't understand them. But it's quite helpful to have you around to explain why I'm supporting something, when it isn't obvious to me as to why we should be, but I'm sure there's a good reason behind it, and you do it so well. The last person who did this to me was Bob Marshall-Andrews, who was, if you recall, a former Labour MP, was very good at amending anti-terrorist legislation. And one night, the House adjourned at 10 o'clock and decided to come back at 2:30 in the morning to continue the debate. And the first up was his amendments, which, because they were put in by Bob Marshall-Andrews, I had signed them all. He wasn't there, so the Speaker said, call Mr. Jeremy Corbyn. What the hell is this stuff? So I read it out. That took a few minutes. That's the first part of the speech. And then I said, this is very important. And we ploughed on through, and one or two made helpful interventions, which I agreed with them on. And then eventually Bob Marshall-Andrews came back after I'd concluded my earth-shattering contribution at 2:45 in the morning, and I said, Bob, where the bloody hell were you? He said, dear boy, that bottle of Chablis would have been a crime not to have finished it. And then proceeded to make an incredibly lengthy contribution, which I couldn't understand a word of, but it sounded good. But we did force votes on it, so fun and games in the Palace of Varieties. But quite seriously, I really respect and admire Mark and his union and what that union does. And the job centre, the Finsbury Park Job Centre, is behind my house. So your members who smoke stand outside the back door and feed my cat. So the cat plays a huge role in all these matters. And the cat is quite disappointed when you have a strike, because, you know, there's nobody there. So what's the cat supposed to do? But the way your union has worked and worked and worked to defend its members, to say to the members, you are at one with the people on the other side of the counter, because genuinely, don't misquote Cameron, we're all in this together. We obviously need our jobs, but we support a welfare system that provides for those in desperate need, doesn't go through the humiliation of ATOS and all those other things. And you've created this massive movement within your union and others. And so, whilst obviously most people in this room are members of the Labour Party or in unions that are affiliated with the Labour Party, in reality, when there's a campaign on, like when there's a strike on, there's only one place to be. Absolutely only one place to be. When there's a picket line, there's only one side of that line to be on. And it's that strength of that movement that is a pressure on the Labour Party, on the Parliamentary Labour Party, on everything else. So why did the party leadership announce they were going to get rid of the bedroom tax? I hope it was because they think it's fundamentally wrong. I think it's because they've been getting it in the neck from so many people up and down the country saying, why the hell can't you commit now to getting rid of the bedroom tax? It's a victory for all of us that have been campaigning on the bedroom tax. Think of it in those terms. And Royal Mail is the next one, absolutely obvious. Why does the government want to privatise Royal Mail? Because it wants TNT to take over all the easy bits of central city delivery. It wants Royal Mail to be stuck with delivering a postcard once a month to a croft in some remote part of Scotland. High costs for them, low costs for TNT. It's the destruction of everything we believe in universal services and natural public monopolies like water, gas, electricity, post, and all the other things. Now, I would like to think that Miliband is going to get up tomorrow and say, we're going to fight it, and the first thing an incoming Labour government will do, if you succeed in privatising it, will be bring it back. That will stop it in its tracks now. So that's surely the strong point we have to make. The other points I want to make before I conclude are some thoughts on the rest of the world. On the issues that Mark was talking about, the biggest issue I face in my constituency and any London MP faces is the crisis of housing at the present time. The crisis goes something like this. We have every council place absolutely taken within a few days of it being made vacant, and the council are pretty efficient at dealing with that. We have every housing association place taken in exactly the same way. The council, like every other London authority and many around the country, the only way it can fulfil its housing obligation is putting people in the private rented sector. And it can't put them in the private rented sector in the local community because they're too expensive, so it puts them somewhere else. And then the families don't want to lose their school, lose their community and so on. So you have primary school children being dragged halfway across London to keep a place at a local primary school because they can't afford to live within the area because the housing benefit bill does not meet the rents that are charged. And in a sense, the government is right that we spend far too much money on housing benefit. There's a much easier way of dealing with it than spending more money, and that is to bring in proper controls of the private rented sector, including rent controls. So I am, with the support of John and Katy and many others, introducing a private member's bill on this in the middle of October to control the private rented sector all the way through from discrimination against people on benefits not being allowed to rent, right the way through to environmental standards, registration of landlords, registration of agents, longevity, much longer tenancies and much more secure tenancies, and of course rent control. It works in Germany, it works in parts of the USA, it works in an awful lot of places. It's that we have an economic model in this country that is frankly nonsense, because everything seems to rely on the idea that if property prices are rising, then somehow that's creating wealth and creating money. So the prices go up a bit more, people borrow more against the value of their property, therefore the prices go up, therefore they borrow more. Hello, South Sea Bubble, 2008, it's all there in this kind of absurd economic model. We need commitments, absolutely, on housing, on the development of new council housing, security of tenure, and stop being apologetic about it. Stop being apologetic about the welfare state. Stop being apologetic about universal benefits and a universal health service. My parents' generation and my grandparents' generation fought for us to have a national health service, fought for us to live in a society where the community as a whole protected you against destitution. That is the whole principle of a welfare state. So why do we keep on buying in this narrative of the Daily Mail, of the Evening Standard, of the Express and all the others, that somehow or other nobody is on benefit deserves it, everybody on benefit is some kind of scrounger, and you've got to shop your neighbour in order to make yourself feel good? And so we go into this sort of nasty telltale society rather than a society based on solidarity. Surely that's a message that we can get across, and we can make our movement stronger as a result of it. If we have a strong movement that can move people's opinions, ideas, and raise their ambitions, then that is how the 1945 election result came about. It wasn't won in the 3 weeks of the campaign, it was won on every hunger march and every demonstration and every strike all through the 1930s, when it seemed desperate and horrible and awful. They fought through, and eventually that brought about big changes and a welfare state. And on a parallel, the point John just made about the amazing vote that happened on Syria. I mean, I was not totally confident we were going to win it, quite honestly. John and I were talking about it just before the vote, and we didn't think we'd got enough votes to do it. We thought we were going to go down to another glorious defeat. We didn't. We won it. And if you think about it, it's a pretty important game changer that a British Parliament refused a government's request to authorise military action to intervene in an already bloody, nasty and terrible civil war. That was refused. And that had a knock-on effect in the USA. It forced Russia and the USA to come together. It forced some talks to take place, and hopefully, eventually it will encourage some kind of political settlement in Syria. I'm not here to apologise for those that abuse human rights any more than anyone else is in this room, but I do know that every war has to end with a political agreement and a political settlement. So we need to understand the history of the straight lines on the map, the way empires divided things up, and the way they divided one community against another. That is what internationalism is about. So when we won that, we won it because of all of you that marched on February the 15th, 2003, and all the other demonstrations that we held. Things have changed. But let's not rest on laurels. Let's go forward a bit from here. If our Parliament and our party can eventually get itself into a position of opposing military intervention, then let's think it a bit further. Why are we still wedded to the idea that by spending, say, £35 billion a year on defence budget, we can give ourselves global reach? What do we need this global reach for? Why do we need to have armed forces that can go anywhere in the world, other than to join in the USA in going around the world, protecting its sources, in quotation marks, of raw materials, of minerals, of oil, of manganese, of tin, of cobalt, whatever it happens to be? Or do we instead look to a world where we talk about the sharing of resources, talk about the protection of human rights, talk about the solidarity of peoples rather than the exploitation of peoples? And so a big decision is going to come up in the British Parliament in 2016. Main gate decision on replacement of the Trident system, including this massive order for the new submarines. It's going to cost roughly £100 billion. £100 billion. Are Labour MPs really, in 2016, going to vote to spend £100 billion on weapons of mass destruction that can only destroy large numbers of civilians who are not involved in any conflict in any way? Are they really going to do that when there's demands for health, for education, for housing, demands for better infrastructure, demands for a fairer kind of benefit system, demands for all those things, and above all, demands for investment in jobs for young people? I don't say there's going to be £100 billion spare that we can certainly spend it on anything we like. I want that £100 billion invested in high-tech industries, in developing real jobs where people aren't making weapons of mass destruction. They're instead promoting green energy, they're promoting green transport systems, they're promoting a sustainable planet, not a destructive planet. Surely that is a way we could go. Is this popular or unpopular with people outside? I talk to an awful lot of people. I go to an awful lot of demonstrations. I go to an awful lot of meetings, and I talk to an awful lot of people in my constituency. I don't find there is opposition to this. Instead, I find there is actually enormous support for the idea that we change our whole approach to the rest of the world, stop basking in the setting sun of neo-colonialism, and instead put ourselves in a place that we want to live as part of the planet, not those that control the planet. Surely that is something we can do. To achieve that, we campaign. To achieve that, we work. And above all, to achieve that, we educate our young people in the real history of this country. The struggle that brought about the changes, sort of things that Captain Swing and so many others' stories are about. Those that brought about the National Health Service, those that brought about independence to end empire. That's the real history our young people have got to understand. And so I say to you, whenever you're campaigning, look at the past, look at the history, learn the lessons from it, and don't repeat them in the future, so we don't go to war again. We don't destroy Afghanistan, we don't destroy Iraq, we don't destroy Libya, we don't use chemical weapons, we don't deny people's human rights. Instead, we make our contribution to a world where human rights are respected, children are respected, healthcare is shared, education is shared, and above all, our environment is protected. That, to me, is the kind of socialist society that I want to live in, and I know you do too. Thank you very much.